So picture this, it's 1979, Black & Decker has just released their Dustbuster. The #1 movie of the year that won the Oscar was Kramer versus Kramer. Gas was, guess how much a gallon?
75 cents.
Not quite.
95.
Right in between. So gas on average was 86 cents a gallon. Okay. Victoria's Secret opened its first stores, and Have a Coke and a Smile was the jingle of the year. The other thing about 1979 was I was just tall enough to ride the Logger's Revenge at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. The other thing about 1979 is that it's the first time that I can recollect being self-deceptive. So let me explain. So for those of you that are familiar with the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, it's in the Central California area, it's a haven during the time of the sweltering heat that one may experience, as I did in my childhood in the Central Valley. So every year, for a couple of weeks out of the summer, our parents would take us to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk to have some fun. Most of those 2 weeks were spent at the beach, but behind the beach is this fabulous boardwalk that's full of rides. And there would be just one day out of those 2 weeks that my mom would say, all right, you guys can get the all-day wrist bracelet and ride every single ride that you want to ride from sunup to sundown. So we waited every trip. We waited for that one day where we got to go to the boardwalk and ride rides all day long. This particular year, 1979, my cousin Richie, who's just about 2 months older than me, came with us on vacation. And so he, as I, was just tall enough to ride the Logger's Revenge. And for those of you that aren't familiar, the Logger's Revenge, and I have a picture of it here, the Logger's Revenge is that slow ride in the log through the rapids, right? You can see along the top, with the plunge down into the waiting, climactic, water-filled ending where you get soaked, right? So as Richie and I were riding the rides that day, we were making our way down towards the Logger's Revenge at the boardwalk, and we were excited, we were thrilled, right? The first year we got to ride it on our own. So on our way, all of a sudden, I got a sudden urge. I had to pee. I had to pee so bad. But the thing that crossed my mind is that I could not wait in line at the women's restroom, like there always is at the women's restroom, and also wait in line at the Logger's Revenge, so I had to choose, right? So I had a moment of brilliance, a little over 6 years old, a moment of brilliance, and I decided that I'll forego the line at the women's restroom, and I'll wait in line with my cousin Richie on the ride. We'll ride the Logger's Revenge. At the climactic ending, as we go down, I'll just pee my pants. Because I figured, what the heck? I'm going to get wet anyways. I'm going to go down. I have to pee. I'll pee my pants. The water will splash. I'm going to be wet. Nobody's going to know the difference, right? Well, lo and behold, probably needless to explain, when I got off the ride and saw my mother, I did not resemble nor smell like the chlorinated water of the Logger's Revenge. So what ended up being a brilliant idea, and what I thought was a good idea, something that, gosh, this will really make my day, save me some time, it was deceptive, right? And in the end, I was found out. And so I started with that simple story because what happens is, as we look at deception, and we, as children, there's times like that where we don't know we're being deceptive. That's what self-deception is all about. But what ends up happening is, as we go through childhood into young adulthood, deception's all around us. Whether it's the fat-free cookies that promise that they are healthy for you, whether it's we're driving down Interstate 5 in the California heat in August and you see the Mirage that's straight ahead in the lane that you're driving in, whether it's the political advertisements that we see annually here in the U.S., or whether it's us as leaders, right? So we as leaders on a day in and day out basis are deceptive. And when we look at self-deception, let me share with you the definition. So this is from Oxford Dictionary. So the definition of self-deception is the action or practice of allowing oneself to believe that a false or unvalidated feeling, idea, or situation is true. Right? So what happens is, as leaders, we need to be aware of this self-deception that creeps into our world. And as we think about it, it's really not that we intend to be self-deceptive. So when we look at leadership self-deception, what happens is it's about how we see people. We either see people as objects or we see people as people. And as leaders, most of us, I know there's some exceptions out there, but most of us care. Or most of us think that we care, right? And it's not that we don't care, but we don't care as much as we think we do. Right? So let's look at it from a little bit from a corporate perspective. And so I want you to picture this group of people on the slide. This is your current team. All right, so these are the people that are sitting on your team right now. Towers Watson did a global study, and if they were to ask these people on your team if you were the driver of their engagement in the workplace, this many of them would say yes, right? About 80% of your team would say, yes, my leader is responsible for driving my engagement within the organization, within my job, and so on, right? If you were to go back to this same team and you were to say, how many of these people think that you as their leader have their sincere interest in their well-being, that you care about them, you'd have this many people left, right? So 38% on average. And so it begs us to ask the question, well, why is that the case? Right? And this is where that self-deception starts to weave into our day in and day out world. So as we move forward, it really is time to take some proactive steps and really looking at how do we see people that work for us more, because we already see them as people, we do, but how do we see them more as people so we care as much as we think we care, right? And that deception, we eliminate that deception. So I wanted to do a simple exercise, is think in your minds or write down, 5 people that you work with right now on a day in and day out basis that you care for, right? So just take a couple seconds. 5 people on a day in and day out basis that you care for. All right, we got our 5. Now, those same 5 people, I want you to think about if there's ever been a time, and again, these are people you care about, right? Has there ever been a time where you have seen them, 1, as a vehicle for getting something done, all right? Like a car gets you from one place to another, to somebody, maybe somebody on your team that helped with a project, they played a certain role. So a vehicle to get something done, right? The other is if you've ever seen any of these people as an obstacle to accomplishing something that needed to be accomplished, right? Whether it be maybe a lack of skill set, time of the day, that sort of thing. So first one, have you ever seen any of them as a vehicle? Have you ever seen any of them as an obstacle? And the last one, have you ever thought of them as just irrelevant in some way? Furniture, maybe. You might care about them, but they're kind of a little bit more on the irrelevant side. So here's time for a little bit of vulnerability. Does any of the people that, just by a show of hands, anybody have anybody on their list that they have seen them at some point in time as a vehicle, an obstacle, or irrelevant? Yeah? Okay. All right. So those 3 things, when we see somebody as a vehicle, obstacle, or irrelevant, that's the times where self-deception creeps in and we're seeing people as objects instead of people. Right? So if we can shift our focus, there's hope, right? If we can shift our focus by looking at what's our responsibility as a leader, how do I facilitate and participate in a collaborative way as a leader, and what influence do I have? If we can look at those 3 things and ask us some very reflective questions, it's the most natural way to get you out of what we call the box of self-deception, right? Since we don't mean to be there, but this box exists. Okay, so let's talk about that for a little bit. So the first one is take personal responsibility. So with personal responsibility, what we're looking at here is looking really at the impact that we have on other people. Because a lot of times we're concerned about the impact that people have on us and not as concerned about what impact do we have on others. All right, so who has the responsibility box? Somebody has a deceptive box. All right. Okay, so Andrea,
Yes.
if you could open your responsibility box and tell me what question lies within that box.
How am I a problem for others?
How am I a problem for others? So a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, we go through a day in and day out basis and we recognize what comes at us, which are things that are problems for us, that we need to solve, that we need to fix. But the first step here is looking at switching that around in order to get rid of that self-deception, to see people more as people than objects, is to ask themselves, can you say it one more time?
How am I a problem for others?
How am I a problem for others? All right, so that's the first question. Now, once we start asking that question and give ourselves a time to really honestly answer, how am I getting in the way? If I really care, it's about looking at the mirror and saying, how am I getting in the way? Right? So once we do that, then we're really concerned about our impact on other people. Then we look at collaboration. And collaboration is, we hear about, it's about, everything from there's all these silos that exist to, we need to make sure our teams, we have project teams that cross-pollinate, and how do we make sure they work together, and what are all those behaviors, and blah, 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 right? Valid. But when we look at collaboration from a self-deception perspective, there's some important questions that we need to ask too. So who has the collaboration box? Cello. So if you wouldn't mind asking us what questions are in your box. And there's a few here. And if you wouldn't mind using the microphone. Thanks.
What is each of these individuals trying to achieve? Whose work affects mine? How can I be more helpful to others? In what ways have I gotten in their way? Are there ways I have made it harder or failed to make it easier for them to achieve their objectives?
All right. So at the end of the day, it's how can I be more helpful to other people? Right? So when you look at those 4 questions, the thing that's interesting is that when we go through the first question, which is whose work affects mine, a lot of times we know what our responsibilities are. And we operate based upon what we feel that our objectives are that we need to meet. What happens if we're really looking at people and caring about what they're doing and wanting to collaborate, it has to be about them and not about us, right? So with those 4 questions, the approach there is to really, again, take the focus off of ourselves and take the focus on other people. Okay? The last piece, so if we're able to take responsibility, if we're able to more effectively collaborate by asking these questions, the third piece is what impact does it have on our ability to influence? Right? And so, Joan, you have the last box. Can you share with us the question as far as influence?
How can I help things go right?
How can I help things go right? So when we think about that question and we think about influence typically is we're trying to get somebody to do something we want them to do, right? We're trying to solve something, we're trying to make something, we're trying to take away pain in some way, or we're trying to push our idea. With this one, it's how can I help things go right? It's taking anytime that there's a problem, and we want to be able to influence, and looking at it, reframing it from, instead of how I can stop things from going wrong, how can I make it go right? So it's almost as if there's, some authors that talk about this, as in a leadership capacity, the ability to kind of step back and get on the balcony and be able to look at the greater, what's the greater objective? How can we, by asking that question, how can I help make things go right? And by getting on the balcony, the ability to naturally reframe and approach things in a way that they help people instead of seeing people as objects. All right? So as I conclude today, it's really, as we go through these questions, they're meant to be tools. And in essence, what they're there to do is help us get out of these boxes, right, and eliminate the self-deception. And so, going back to this team, ultimately, Simon Sinek says it quite well, is that make it all about them, not about you, right? It's about seeing people as people, not as objects. And I just wanted to end with one more picture. And this picture, just a brief story here. This is my purse. And this is a picture of my purse. You can kind of see up in the corner that there's you may notice that it's one of the placards you see in the back of a taxi cab. Well, this was in Chicago a few years ago. And I thought that my desire to have beer mugs that were logoed from places that I had gone on trips was a great idea because it was free marketing for anybody that might come to my home and I serve them a beer in it, right? Well, the only reason I share this is because self-deception, it doesn't stop, it doesn't go away, there's not a simple fix to it. I now know that when you really think about it, that's a belief that's really false, right? And that I'm truly being deceptive, so I don't do this anymore. But it's one of those things where it's continuously, it's something that we need to work on. And when we talk about, we get in these behaviors and we get in the box, right? We get in the self-deceptive box. We get in and out of the box all day long, multiple times a day. And so it's just being able to think back to those 4 questions, or excuse me, the 7 questions that we talked about. And just by asking those, really kind of diving deeper and thinking, how can I be more influential through my responsibility in collaboration and see people as people instead of objects? Thank you.